Welcome to a quick look at the 2017 Infiniti QX30. Now the QX30 is Infiniti's attempt at combining hatchbacks and CUVs. And the thing is, Infiniti didn't want to make a huge investment in a platform like this, so they leveraged a partnership with Mercedes. So really, underneath the skin, we're looking at a Mercedes GLA. Now, that's not a big deal because sometimes if you were to go and design a car yourself and make a new car from the ground up and you weren't sure that you could afford the investment or you didn't want to put that investment in that segment, it makes sense to partner up with somebody else that already has one built. So that's why this exists. Now, really, when you look at it, it looks like a straight up car on stilts. Now you can tell from the exterior here, this is where Infiniti spent most of their own time engineering. They wanted fresh sheet metal. They wanted to restyle this over the Mercedes, and I think for the most part it works. Now the problem when you try to get these aggressive looking vehicles is the wheel gap. Because it's so raised up, the proportions seem strange to me. And then you get to the front grille, which looks very spindle-like, almost like the Lexus. You may have noticed that Shoppe 2 is under construction. So we're gonna take a look at the underneath of the QX30 before we take a quick drive. Now that we have the QX30 on the BendPak lift, you might be wondering where Scott is. Was he fired? No, he wasn't fired. He was busy getting an ear lavage, so he can't be with us today, or with me, rather. And we're under construction, so this is strange anyway. But under the QX30, it's pretty simple for the most part. You don't have a ton of panels covering up the underbody of this car. That is because they probably want to keep airflow for this turbo setup. The second thing is you can tell they have aluminum lower control arms, aluminum knuckles, but this is a strut-based suspension. This is not double wishbone. This looks more like a balance between what you'd find in a regular CUV and kind of an upscale piece. And when you look at the middle of this car, you realize this is all-wheel drive. This has the all-wheel drive option, and I said this about the CX3, I wouldn't buy it without it, because this makes very little sense as a front-wheel drive vehicle. This is what gives you the utility. Now the middle part of the car has these asphalt or composite covers along the side. There's not a ton of aero here. You have your exhaust, and then the drive shaft is actually hidden above the heat shield, and it runs above here to the back differential. In the back, we have a multi-link suspension, one that uses aluminum lower control arms, an aluminum hub, and then you pretty much have stamped steel everything else. Now, one of the things you'll see here is that they use a separated coil spring from the damper. And a lot of the reason they did this is to be able to lower the load floor in the rear for more cargo capacity. Now, this car does not have electronic or adjustable dampers. And that's one of the things I think at this price point, based on my driving experience, that it could absolutely use to give it a better personality on the road. But over the, really, there's not a lot to go over here. Most of the people that are looking at this are not going to care too much about the underbody section of this car. You have that typical German on-demand all-wheel drive system. This is just a lot of what we see over and over again in this segment of CUVs. Now that I've gotten my hands dirty with the QX30, it's time to take this thing for a drive and see if it's going to wet my whistle. The Infiniti QX30. This is going to be a different type of drive because I am loaded full of IKEA items, lattes, dolls, feminine hygiene products, and muscle milk or, protein shakes. So let's take a look at this car in a straight line to start off. Okay, first thing you're gonna notice about it is these new 4-popper turbos. They're designed for efficiency, but they want to give you the torque of a V6. Now, almost every single 4-popper turbo, except for some of the sports cars out there, they sound horrible. They sound like vacuum cleaners. So what can engineers do besides, well, they can put on crazy exhaust, which is too loud for most people. You can do weird intake tuning, which, you know, it doesn't do much. But now the new trend is digital engine noise. It sounds like a synthesizer through your speakers to kind of augment the motor. And in the QX30, that's what they're doing. And it sounds very fake all the time. Now, the second thing to talk about with the QX30 is, well, obviously it's a Mercedes underneath it. You know, they're not fooling anybody here. But at the same time, there's some things that I've noticed driving it more. And one is it's extremely quiet and very solid feeling when you're driving it. In fact, I don't remember there's been some cars, but this one is definitely one of the top for I'm always speeding in it. I get 0 sense of speed. I'm looking down on the highway and I'm going 70 miles an hour and it's like absolutely nothing. And that's a huge pro for somebody that wants kind of a little bit of a disconnect, or, you know, just wants to be removed from the environment around them. And we're gonna go into these turns here with all this crap flying around. Oh, my new cabinets. You can't disable traction control or stability control. It's always on here. But the good thing is, the best thing about this car is its steering. It is really quick to react. The turn-in is excellent. This is all-wheel drive, and the all-wheel drive pulls you out of a lot of nonsense. It doesn't understeer as much. Oh, my cabinets. But they're still understeer. This is not a sporty car. It's not a sports car. And I think 99.9% of people that are driving this are going to be absolutely putting it around. Now, one thing that I'm not doing at all is I've stopped using the manual control of the automatic transmission. Despite this being a dual clutch, that's going to be a dent. Despite this being a dual clutch, well, it feels like a torque converted automatic to me. In regular driving, it's really quick to shift, but when you're doing more aggressive driving, it's not as fast as you would expect. Manual control is almost just a joke. It just takes over. It auto upshifts. It's not responsive to downshifting, so just keep it in drive, and that's kind of the best experience you're gonna get. Now, the shift behavior does have some issues that I found. When I first got this car, I would go into reverse and start going at a pretty decent clip. I mean, not fast, but not, I'm not putting. And the car wanted to stall on me a couple times. Same thing when I was going forward. I put it in reverse, go to drive, come up to a stop sign, and there's a lot of time where it's like hesitating, where it wants to stall. And to me, if I'm having that problem, chances are other people are too. And it could be a transmission programming bug or just an ECU bug for the engine programming. Now, the meat and potatoes of the QX30 is this is a hatchback on stilts. It's for somebody that doesn't want a car, doesn't want a hatchback. They want a CUV, SUV, but they don't want a big SUV or a CUV, and that's kind of where this fits in. I think, in all honesty, I think this is probably designed for the female demographic. Somebody of a smaller body type, somebody that is shorter is going to feel really comfortable in this car. Somebody that is larger, taller, wider, especially taller, is going to feel claustrophobic. There's not a lot of headroom, and a lot of that has to do with the moonroof that's here. Just the overall interior proportions feel more like a compact car than a larger car, and I think it's gonna be great for some and really bad for others. Now, the most negative part about this QX30 is its ride quality. It's not that it doesn't handle well, the steering's good, all that stuff, but I feel like the ride is way too choppy. It feels very over-dampened, and when you get on rough pavement specifically, this thing it's just way too hard, namely when you get in the back seat. I don't know if they just carried over some of the European tuning of the suspension and didn't change it much for this model, but it's too firm in the bad roads of the Midwest where I am, and it gets really annoying really fast when you're not on anything but smooth pavement. Now, for a car like this, there's something you have to say about that. If the transmission was responsive, if the motor was, you know, always on boil and it was more of a sporty experience all the time, I could totally accept a rough ride. But this is not that car. So having a firm suspension doesn't do it for me, and I think a lot of people are going to notice that. Now, one of the things too is you have big wheels and you have big tires in here, and when you have, you know, smaller sidewalls or more car-like sidewalls like this, it's going to affect ride quality. I'd almost be curious to see what a set of like winter tires or smaller wheels and tires would do for this. Oh man, my latte better not flip over. The conclusion of the QX30. I know this is a quick review format, and we'll be back to normal action next week, I promise. This vehicle is confusing, and I say that a lot about CUVs and crossovers and hatchbacks sometimes in the modern age of vehicles. This is a car, CUV, that I think is going to have pretty limited appeal overall, mostly because of its size, but I'll be curious to see how many they sell and the demographics of this car, of who's buying it, because I've had some people in here that really love this car. They love the interior, they love all of that. So we'll just see at the price point if it's going to pull people away from more mainstream crossover hatchbacks.